السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة المتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Welcome to our fifth session in regards to the fiqh of fasting. Inshallah, today we'll be covering the rules in regards to the i'tikaf, the spiritual retreat, which is usually done, and it is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to do it in the month of Ramadan in the last 10 days. So, mainly we'll cover that inshallah, and maybe a few other miscellaneous rules. Jumping straight into it, he starts with the definition of i'tikaf. What is i'tikaf? هو الإقامة بنيته في مسجد تقام فيه الجماعة بالفعل للصلوات الخمس. So he says it is to remain in the masjid with an intention. So the intention is needed. تقام فيه الجماعة بالفعل للصلوات الخمس. So in such a masjid wherein there is the five daily prayers taking place, okay, in congregation. And he says that فلا يصح في مسجد لا تقام فيه الجماعة للصلاة على المختار, that in such a masjid wherein the 5 daily salawat do not take place, the 5 daily prayers do not take place in congregation, well then in that type of a masjid the i'tikaf cannot take place according to the preferred opinion. There are other opinions in the Hanafi school of thought. Then now he speaks about a woman's i'tikaf. وَلِلْمَرْأَةِ الْإِعْتِكَافُ So for a woman, the i'tikaf is in the masjid of her house. Okay, for a woman, the i'tikaf is in the masjid of her house, and that is a place which is designated, which she has designated for prayers. Okay, in her home, it could be a room, it could be a corner of the room, it could be the whole room, but an area which is designated. Now, on this, there's another point to make, which is, according to many scholars, there's no difference in the man and woman in terms of a man and a woman where they do their i'tikaf, that they should both do it inside the masjid. In the Hanafi school of fiqh, anyway, at the least, I'm not sure about others, but in the Hanafi school of fiqh, there's a woman should do it at home, and the Hanafi scholars have their opinions and reasons for that. Although they will say that a woman's i'tikaf inside the masjid would be valid. Now, in regards to the different types of i'tikaf that there are, وَالْإِعْتِكَافُ عَلَى ثَلَاثَةِ أَقْسَامٍ, that the i'tikaf, the spiritual retreat, is of 3 types. So it is, the first one, wajib, it is compulsory, and that is in relation to that type of an i'tikaf where a vow has been made that, Allah, if I pass my test or whatever that vow was made, then I will do i'tikaf for X amount of days. And if a person does pass that test or whatever the vow was, then they will have to fulfill it. And the second is a sunnah. It's a sunnah mu'akkada, which is done the last 10 days of Ramadan. So that's the sunnah, the one that the Prophet ﷺ would do every Ramadan in the last 10 days. So the timing of when to start is on the 20, because the night starts before the day, so the night precedes the day. So on before the beginning of the 21st night of Ramadan, people should be in the masjid, and by the 21st night, because remember the time starts from Maghrib, it's from Maghrib to Maghrib, right? So by Maghrib time of the 21st night, people will now start their i'tikaf, and that's the sunnah i'tikaf. And then you have the third type of i'tikaf, which is nafil. It's an optional, and a person can do that for however short of a time a person will. So it could be literally whilst a person is walking from one end of the masjid to the other, could be for an hour, is entirely up to a person. In regards to i'tikaf, a person should always stay inside the masjid. I mean, there are many objectives of i'tikaf, and we'll speak about them in the spiritual dimensions of Ramadan. But essentially speaking, you want to gain close proximity to Allah by disconnecting yourself from the rest of the world as much as possible. So a person should always stay inside the masjid unless there is a need to leave the masjid. And by leaving the masjid without a need, then you're invalidating your i'tikaf. So in regards to the i'tikaf, there are conditions. Okay? So in regards to the i'tikaf, when a person goes into the i'tikaf, for that to be valid, basically a person will need to have an intention. We spoke about the importance of having an intention beforehand, and along with that, they should be free from impurity. Okay, najasa as defined in Islam. So they should be free from the postnatal bleeding, from the menstrual cycle, and if one is on the menstrual cycle or is going through the postnatal bleeding, then they cannot do their i'tikaf. It doesn't go to mean that they will not be rewarded for their intention. Inshallah, the reward Allah will reward, and Allah is the most merciful, the gracious. He is Ar-Rahman and He is Ar-Rahim. But whilst a person is doing i'tikaf, they must stay within the boundary of the masjid. Okay, they must stay within the boundary and not go out unless there is a need. So some examples of a need is basically you have a shari valid reason. For example, praying Jum'ah. So praying Jum'ah, maybe in some masjids there is the function of maybe praying the 5 daily prayers inside the masjid, and then Jum'ah may be prayed inside a field where the whole community get together. That's a possibility. So for that reason, then leaving the masjid to pray Jum'ah will be valid. But then you should if you ever do go out of the masjid for a valid reason, then you go and fulfill that reason and then come back. You're not meant to stop anywhere else or anything, or stop and start chatting to anyone else or hang around. You go for the need and come back straight away without stopping anywhere else, and that's extremely important. Or something to answer the call of nature, okay, whatever that, or to have a ghusl, to have a bath, to clean yourself from an impurity. Maybe a person goes to sleep at night or at any time and wakes up and has had a wet dream. So then a person will need to now, of course, have the ritual bath, the ghusl. So a person can leave the masjid for reasons like that. These are valid reasons. Or to even protect one's own life. Maybe there's a situation that's taking place, and to save his own life, to protect himself, he has to leave the masjid. So due to necessity, basically a life and death situation, then of course you can leave the masjid. There's no doubt about that. But if somebody does leave the masjid, the area, without a valid reason, then they've invalidated their i'tikaf. And in some schools of fiqh, at least in the Hanafi school anyways, according to some of the opinions, a person should do qada. So they don't need to do all the days that they've missed. Basically, they just do 1 day of i'tikaf, according to some of the scholars. So let's say, for argument's sake, you're doing the sunnah i'tikaf. You've done 5 days and then you break it. You've gone out for no reason. And you got 5 days remaining, right? So a person is only required to do 1 day of i'tikaf as a qada, and that's the day for which he actually broke the i'tikaf itself. The qada is only for that 1 day, regardless of how many days you've got left or how many days you've done. Okay. Now there are things which are permissible for a person in i'tikaf to do. He's of course allowed to eat, drink, go to sleep inside the masjid. The reason why he mentions this is because, according to at least some of the Hanafi scholars, they do not allow or permit eating and drinking inside the masjid. But whilst in the state of i'tikaf, a person is permitted to eat and drink inside the masjid. Sleeping is of course fine, and even doing some business. Of course, you don't want to make your whole i'tikaf about business, but just to, your business isn't harmed, or your work or something, then a person is allowed to attend to those needs. Next, he goes on to what is disliked. Those things which are disliked, he mentions to bring trades items which are going to be used for trading inside the masjid, and just focusing on just on trade. Also, is disliked to remain quiet, to remain silent, if one believes that by remaining silent it will bring someone close to Allah. So this is something that's quite interesting, because many people, when they're doing i'tikaf, they think that, you know what, I'm here inside the masjid, I need to keep my mouth shut and not talk to anyone whatsoever. And that's what spirituality is, that's what is goodness. And that's not necessarily the case. Talking is not a bad thing per se. But if somebody remains silent due to the fact that they want to control their tongue and not say anything which is wrong or unlawful, then that's praiseworthy. But just being silent, thinking that silence in of itself is praiseworthy, that's not the case. It's a very subtle distinction, but one that's quite an interesting one. Now, what are the things that invalidates i'tikaf and is unlawful during the i'tikaf? It is وَحُرِمَ الْوَطْعُ وَدَوَاعِهِ. So it is haram, it is forbidden to have to indulge in sexual intercourse or to kiss and fondle whilst in i'tikaf, and that's due to the verse in Surah Baqarah in regards to that do not even it also mentions here that one's i'tikaf is nullified by a person who indulges in sexual intercourse or ejaculates as a result of kissing and fondling. So it will basically invalidate and ruin a person's i'tikaf. Then the Imam brings some other rules in regards to i'tikaf. When a person makes a vow, that generally speaking, when you make a vow of doing an i'tikaf for a day, then it's that you have to do it for the full 24 hours, the day and the night, and you should be fasting as well when you're doing a wajib i'tikaf. But I'm just summarizing. I'm going to skip over that just because we're focusing on Ramadan itself. Then towards the end, he talks about the objectives and the status of i'tikaf. In essence, it's something that to bring us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would do this every year. As a matter of fact, there's quite a few hadith in this regards, which we'll go over in the spiritual dimensions of fasting, inshallah. But inshallah, we'll conclude the i'tikaf topic up to here. Just other than the i'tikaf, there is one other thing I would like to mention, which is the fidya, sadaqatul fitr. Some people call it the fitrana. So there are rules in that regards as well. Let's go over them now, inshallah. So inshallah, we'll conclude with some of the rules with sadaqatul fitr, otherwise known as fitrana, and we'll go by those names: fitrana, sadaqatul fitr. So basically, in Ramadan, according to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person is required to pay a certain amount to the poor people, and so the ruling is this: that any person, any adult who is who has the threshold in terms of finances, who is eligible to pay zakat, he has that nisab, what's known as the nisab, that equivalent amount of what makes zakat an obligation upon a person. If he has that much wealth, then he must pay sadaqatul fitr. Okay, now this sadaqatul fitr, he is responsible for himself. Adults are responsible to pay for themselves. However, as say for example the father, he will have to pay for the children as well. So any child as well, whether they have met the threshold of zakat or not doesn't matter. But because the adult has, well then his children, he will have to pay for them. So even if they're born in Ramadan, he will have to pay on their behalf. So sadaqatul fitr itself, it's a certain amount. We won't get into the details of, just because all charities in your local masjid would calculate the amount for sadaqatul fitr. Basically, it's half a sa of wheat, flour, and or barley. Or one can give one full sa of dates and barley. But anyway, sa is a certain measurement, roughly about 2.2 kilos, and Allah knows best. But nevertheless, your own local masjid would calculate, or even charities online, they will calculate how much the sadaqatul fitr is, or otherwise known as fitrana, and basically a person should pay that. a husband, for example, could pay on behalf of his wife, but then should seek authorization, or the wife can pay on behalf of the husband, but then should seek authorization that, look, I'm paying on your behalf. But the adult will have to pay on behalf of the children, unless the children are adults themselves. If they're adults themselves, then they're not going to be considered as children. They'll be seen as adults, and they will have to pay for themselves. Again, unless authorization is taken. Now, basically, a person should pray, a person should pay the Sadaqatul Fitr before the Eid prayer, and it's an obligation to do from the dawn of the Eid day. Now, a person can pay in advance in the month of Ramadan, even by a few days, a week, even during the beginning of Ramadan. A person can start praying according to many of the opinions of scholars and the ulama. But at the least, by the Eid prayer, before performing the Eid prayer, a person should pay the Sadaqatul Fitr, because essentially you want to pass that money on to the people, to the poor people. Now, as to who this money goes to, it goes to those people who are eligible to be given zakat. Those same people that you give your zakat to, they're the people that you give your Sadaqatul Fitr to. And that's sort of the short ruling of Sadaqatul Fitr. Upon that, we finish. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah grants the ability to take the maximum benefit from the fasts in Ramadan and the full month of Ramadan in of itself. And Allah accept all of our deeds. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah bihamdih. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah, just as a little side note, we will have a separate series, inshallah, in regards to the practical advices, of how to make sure we make the most of the Ramadan and the fast, and the spiritual dimensions of fasting and Ramadan, the itikaf, for people who are on the menstrual cycle or postnatal bleeding, or are not fasting due to a certain illness or anything else. Then, what are the things that we can do? We'll cover that there, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.